Hello and welcome everybody. Today's Fast Track webinar series, we're going to be covering customer and corporate account profiles, how to set them up, some of the relationships you can create in there, as well as the settings that are allowed within the profiles. Looks like we had a couple more people come in. Let's go ahead and get started. Today's part of the Fast Track webinar series, ongoing series, weekly series that we'll be hosting every week. Today we're going to be covering setting up customer and corporate account profile and relationships. We'll be covering how you can add customers, set them up, as well as corporate account profiles, the linking of them together, as well as the settings you can set inside of each of them. Today we have, we have Adam. He'll be assisting with any questions that we may have today. Myself, Brian, and Eddie, who is not here today, but we got a good picture of him so we can remember what he's like there. But he will be back next week. Okay, the agenda today, we're going to start out with adding customer profiles. Adding corporate billing profiles. We'll talk about the relationship between the two, how you link them together, as well as the linking of the customers and corporate billing profiles, what you can do with those. We'll also discuss settings within the profiles, the pricing, how you can assign default pricing to the various corporate profiles or customer profiles and how you utilize them. Or you are also able to adjust their rates within their profiles. We'll discuss that a little bit too. And the contacts that can be added in there. That will also touch on the online booking and notifications that are enabled to those contacts. Keep in mind, we will discuss pricing. I believe that is our next webinar where we'll have a in-depth discussion about creating pricing plans and what you can do with those various things. We'll also have the summary at the end of the webinar and go over some of the reporting functions that are enabled once you set up those various accounts. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. Go ahead and bring up the Fast Track program today. Okay, so up at the top of the program, you're going to see the option for customer and corporate clients. To enter into this area, simply click on the option there, and it will bring you into the customer account area. In here, you can see that there are many different customers already entered into the system. You can search for any of these simply by typing the name, or you are also able to scroll through. You can type first name, last name, corporate affiliation, phone number, some of the other information that's available in here. You can see email addresses. These are the primary email addresses. You can also see which pricing plans are defaulted to those particular customers. And over on the far right, you see two other options here, bill corporate or use corporate pricing. These are settings that are set up within the customer profile that determine if you're going to bill the corporate billing profile and or be utilizing corporate pricing. Keep in mind, as always, in any grid within the program, you are able to export out by utilizing the grid export option. Also in here, we have the corporate billing profiles. Corporate billing profiles would be a list of corporate billing profiles. Those would be associations that the customers may be associated to that can link all of the billing and as well as pricing to those. We also have a customer corporate reports and data export option here. In here, you also have the ability to view customer addresses, email addresses, corporate addresses, so on, and various items there. So if I were to click on the customer email addresses and do a search, it's going to bring me a list of all of the email addresses that are associated to the customers. And if I would like to, from here, I can do an export by clicking on the export option. I'll show you how this works. If I click on the export, I can bring this out in Excel or a CSV file, as well as PDF if I would like to, or HTML or rich text file, Microsoft Word there. By being able to export that out, you could then pull it into maybe a constant contact or another mass distribution mailing program that you may utilize. So going back to the customer and corporate accounts here, we'll go ahead and walk through the process of adding a new one in here by clicking on the Add option down in the lower right-hand corner. You'll see it brings me up a blank form for me to add in all of the customer information. Now, there are various tabs here. We'll discuss those. When you first come into here, first name, last name. First name is not required to enter a corporate or a customer profile. Last name is the minimum, as well as phone number, the minimum that is required to enter a customer profile. We'll go ahead and walk through this. I'll just go ahead and add in A1, test 1, create a phone number for it. From here, I have the ability to add various items to it, such as a cell phone number, email address. This would be a primary email address that's associated to this customer profile. This would be the main email address that any of the documents would be sent to based upon the settings underneath the document options. You can see other things here, account number, not a required field. If you do like to create your own account numbers, you can do that here. A greet sign alias. This would be if the traveler wished to be met with a different name at the airport than their actual name. You could enter something in here, such as Mr. Jones or whatever they would prefer to be met at the airport with. Reference PO, cost code area. These would be required sometimes. Corporations require that you have a specific cost code or reference PO when setting up bills and invoices. Ordered by, if there is generally one person that would be making all of the reservations, you could enter that there, as well as a phone number for it. You'll see right below that, you have the ability to associate the customer profile to a particular company. And by that, I mean within your FASTTRAK program, you have the ability to operate multiple companies. By selecting that dropdown, I could select which company this particular customer was booking their reservations on. Now, keep in mind that inside the reservation, you could change that. Perhaps they called the different one of your companies that day. You have the ability to switch it within the reservation. Over here on the far left, you'll see these color codes. I have orange, pink, black. That's a color code to match each of these companies that are listed in here, which was addressed in the company setup area in a previous webinar. Time zone, by default, the customer will always be local to you. However, perhaps the customer lives overseas or in another state or time zone, and they would be booking in that, even though you were located somewhere else, you are still handling all of their travel accommodations. You can mark them as to which time zone they are located in. By doing that, it will adjust the reservations accordingly so it displays properly on your screen. Even though they may be located someplace else. Booking notes. This is something by entering here that would always appear every time you attempted to book a reservation for this particular customer. This could be something such as, please remember to always obtain latest reference PO or cost code before booking a reservation, or anything you would like to just pop up to remind you. This does not print anywhere. This is merely a pop-up when booking reservations. Restricted drivers enables you to restrict a particular driver from being assigned to this customer. So by nothing checked, every driver is enabled to be assigned to this particular customer. If I were to say this driver was not allowed to drive this customer, that driver will not appear in the list of available drivers when assigning to reservations. Down below here, there's a couple other options here. Customer is an affiliate, excuse me. If this is another transportation company that would be sending you work, you always want to make sure that you select that option that changes some of the paperwork and notifications that is sent out to the customer. Also noting that had this been an affiliate that was sending you work, that is a good example of where I do not need a first name, just a last name. It could be the XYZ limousine company. Mark them as an affiliate. As I said, that affects the paperwork that goes out to them. There's another option here. This is not available yet. This is in the update that is coming. We'll discuss that in the future webinar when we address the updates. Allows affiliate drivers to see passengers in the driver app. Transient account. This is generally used if you are booking, for instance, for a hotel. Perhaps you are working the door and the people that are getting into the vehicle would be listed underneath the XYZ hotel. You're not keeping a track of their names or addresses or anything like that. This enables you to then accept credit cards for each of those passengers and not have to store it back into the database. Transponet booking, that has to do with Transponet, that will be discussed in a future webinar. Do not return hourly pricing. Again, those are settings there. Tax exempt, perhaps you have a customer that does not need to pay taxes. By selecting that option within their profile, it would then have none of the taxes apply to any of their reservations. There's an option here to require reference PO. And again, what that does is when I try to create a reservation, it will prompt me that I have to enter a reference PO prior to saving it. Customer no longer books with you. You may want to utilize the inactive option there. And what that does is it remains in the system, but they will not be in the list of available customers to book reservations on. Lower right-hand corner here requires special handling. That turns the reservation number yellow. I'll demonstrate where that works. There's also an option up here is VIP up at the very top, which turns the customer name red when booking the reservation. Over on the right side here, we have the ability to set up a pricing plan that would be utilized for this customer. Keep in mind that you may always change the pricing plan within the reservation. But by selecting any one of these options here, which are set up in your pricing management, this would be the default pricing plan that is utilized within that customer profile when you're booking a reservation for them. Default vehicle, usually select the vehicle that they utilize most often, perhaps a sedan. Reservation types, vehicle type zones. This just defaults certain things so that when you're booking reservations, it can speed up the process. Again, this would be utilized if the person is always, or I should say maybe 99% of the time, utilizing specific routes. It automatically populates that information into the reservation rather than you having to select it. Keep in mind, you are always able to override that in the reservation. Booking source, category, trip type, category and trip type. Again, these were discussed in a previous webinar, setting up the global settings and lists. These would default into the reservation. or you may select them independently inside each reservation. Collection details. This just is a statement of how you anticipate collecting money from them. Either you're going to bill them, collect money. It may be prepaid if they've already given you deposits. Process usually indicates that I am going to process the credit card once the reservation is completed. You also have the option of how you are going to be processing those or collecting them. Delivery options, mail, email, fax. Keep in mind that none of these affect how the emails or anything goes out. These are just internal reminders to yourself. Invoice terms, these affect when late fees would be applied to a particular customer. The late fees were addressed in the global settings webinar a couple of weeks ago, of where you can set those in and they would calculate automatically after the customer hadn't paid his bill for, say, 30 days or 60 days. Invoice message, this would be if you wanted to add a specific message to their invoices, perhaps thank you for utilizing our services. You can also default that underneath global settings. Create invoice option. This affects what happens when you create an invoice for the customer. It can either show the invoice on the screen, print it out automatically, email it automatically, or take no action. Take no action just merely creates the invoice and you can continue working. That will be addressed in the billing webinar. Pricing notes, these are internal notes only. Perhaps the customer gets a special on Wednesdays. You may want to add something in there so you have a reference to where the pricing is derived from. Miscellaneous notes, these are internal notes only as well. Trip notes and preferences may or may not be displayed on trip sheets and or confirmations. Anything I place in trip notes or preferences, however, would be populated into every reservation when you booked it. The settings about whether they display are set underneath the global settings on the documents tab. Preferences, this could be customer test 1 here prefers blue cars, prefers to listen to specific radio stations. Anything I place in here, again, would be entered into every reservation without the need to re-enter it into it. You also have the ability in here to have multiple addresses for the customer. What I did is I selected the address tab at the top there. I can add as many addresses in here as I would like. They can be distinguished between business, other, or residential. Simply typing in, we do have Google enabled in here now, so by selecting that, it enables me to populate the information in there. Cross street would be a reference for the driver. Additional notes may be something specific about this address, such as you have to back into the driveway or whatever other item you would want to convey to the drivers on all of their trip tickets. You have the ability to mark it as the primary for booking. They could also have another for invoicing if required. By clicking on the add button, you now see that list and available options there. I can add more in here if I would like, a 345 address perhaps, and I could mark that as their invoicing address. By doing so, I now have an address that is their primary. That would be the address that would be populated into reservations. And the invoice is the address that would be displayed on the invoices as you sent them to them. Keeping in mind, I can edit or delete any of these. You have unlimited ability to have as many addresses in here as you would like. Credit cards allows you to enter credit cards into the system. By clicking on the add button there, you can then enter in the credit card number, expiration dates. If this is the primary credit card that will be utilized for their reservations. By selecting the default card, this is the one that would be automatically populated into the reservations. If a credit card is no longer utilized, you can mark it as inactive. It remains in the system, however, it is not available to be added to any reservations or for any billing purposes. Keep in mind that you can again have as many credit cards available to book with within the system for each customer. Contacts. Contacts would be individuals or people that would also perhaps be booking for this traveler. Going back over to the General tab, I had the ability to add in a primary email address. What Contacts does is allows me to have other people with email addresses that may also wish to receive emails for the traveler. By clicking on the add option there, I can type in a first name, last name, and enter in a email address for them. In so doing, I now have the ability to select what this individual would receive when they are selected on the reservation as the booker. They can receive confirmations, updates, cancellations, statements, reminders, as well as in process. And you can also have them receive invoices or not invoices. So perhaps this traveler has a secretary that calls in the reservations. I would add them as the person or individual that may receive confirmations, cancellations, other items there, but none of the invoices go to that individual. I could mark that as none. I could then add another one by clicking on the add button. Such as an accountant, put in their email address, and then select all invoices for that particular person. Now what that does is when the reservation is booked, based upon our settings here, the traveler would receive notifications and confirmations. The booker would receive the confirmations and updates. And then once the job is completed, the accountant would then also receive only the bills. They would not receive any of the previous information there by selecting the all invoices. As you notice, there's also a couple of other options in here. Perhaps you have 3 or 4 different people that book reservations, and based upon who books that reservation, they do need an invoice for it. I could have this option at the bottom here, only invoices containing reservations for this contact. So perhaps there's a Kathy Johnson, Joe Smith, all booking, but when they book, they want to receive their invoices. I would select the option of enabling them to receive the invoices only on the reservations that they have booked reservations for. There's also the ability here to copy another one of the contacts on any of the reservations once they have been selected in the reservation. So in this instance, Test could receive all of the confirmations, but the accountant also wants to receive them. I would select that option there, and they then in turn would both be receiving the confirmations. By selecting none of those options or none of the available contacts in here, they would not receive any of the additional emails. In the instance we have set up, the accountant would only be receiving the invoices. Passengers would be other people who would also be traveling on this profile. By selecting passengers here, it may be something such as a brother, a cousin, an uncle, a mother, any items such as that. I can type in their name cell number, an email address for them also, so they can be copied on any updates and status reminders, as well as I can have a credit card for that individual there. I can put in the address for that person. And by so doing, I now have access to the other travelers, which would be utilizing this account also, without having to continuously ask, what was your brother's address? What was your mother's address? And I'll show you where these things can be applied within the reservations. I can add notes in here. I can also add preferences that are specific to this traveler. I can have multiple addresses, as you can see, for that person there. So again, I can have as many different passengers on this customer profile. Customer pricing. By going into customer pricing, what I initially see is the default pricing plan, which was set up underneath the menu, underneath pricing management. What I see in here are my base rates. For instance, my 6-passenger is $91.30 an hour with a 1-hour minimum. Perhaps I have negotiated a special rate with this particular customer, and I'm going to give them $85 an hour with a 1-hour minimum. By leaving the right side blank, default pricing will always be this center columns here. If I adjust their rates, any number I place over here would be the number that would be displayed in the reservation when booking for this particular customer. You can also see that I can adjust all of the point-to-points as well as fixed rates. All of these are my default rates. Perhaps this individual always wants to give $20. By simply typing in 20 there, it would override the 0, which is in the default pricing, and every reservation would now have $20 added to it as a gratuity. You also have down at the bottom the ability to add fixed charge items which only exist within this customer profile. Anything I add down at the bottom here will not exist in other customer profiles. This may be something such as this individual travels with a dog, and you have stated that you would allow the dog to travel in the vehicle, but you're going to charge a $25 cleanup fee. By clicking on the add option, I then have the ability to add that in there. I could say $25, and then you have the ability to either pay to the driver a percentage of it or none of it, depending upon what you want to do there, and set which types of reservations as well as whether it can be quantified. Keep in mind that the whole structure of pricing is addressed next week in the pricing webinar. This is just letting you know that you can add specific items to a customer. Variables, this lets you adjust the variables. Maybe you've negotiated with this individual that there's only a 20% service fee. By adjusting that there. Also down at the bottom down here, you have the ability to add other rates to this particular customer. You also have the ability to set up specific pricing plans for the customer. Keep in mind that this is looking at a default pricing plan, and I can adjust any of them accordingly. If I needed to set up a special pricing plan for them, I would click on the Set Up Customer Pricing Plan, add a pricing plan. I could call it Joe's or Kathy's or whatever I want to do. And I could either copy over or create a whole new plan if I wanted to copy over. In so doing, in this instance, I'm going to select None and click OK. And what that does is now I've created a pricing plan, again, that only exists within this customer profile. By adding Joe's in there, I can now adjust all of these rates. I can create whatever fixed charge items I need to, as well as variables or tax charges. Keep in mind that the pricing plan of Joe only exists inside of this customer profile. So if a customer has a specific pricing plan that does not match up to any other existing pricing plan, always create that plan within their profile so it's not available to any other customer. Going back in here, I also have the ability to discounts. I can create discounts that are associated to this customer by selecting on the add option. Type in whatever discount I want to, whatever I want to call it. Select my percentage or fixed dollar amount. Select what it applies to. Also select which fixed charge items it might apply to. But up here, I also have the ability to select which particular pricing plan this discount applies to. What that means is I can have a discount for the default pricing plan. I could set in there 5%. And I could also have another discount based upon a different pricing plan. I could have a pricing or discount of 6% on that particular plan. What that is now is based upon which pricing plan I select when I create the reservation, it would apply the appropriate discount to that. Agents. Agents are commissionable agents. We discussed that last week's webinar in the employee, affiliate, and agents section. But by clicking on the add option down at the bottom, I now have access to all of the agents which were created underneath the employee, affiliates, and agents there. Type in whatever I would like for the description, and I can set an amount there, fixed dollar or percentage. And again, what that does is every reservation now will have that commissionable agent applied to it. Deposits. Deposits allow me to apply a deposit to the customer profile to be used later. There are two ways to take a deposit. You may take a deposit specifically for a reservation. You may also post a deposit to a customer profile. Perhaps the customer has 6 cars or 8 cars next week all doing something, maybe a wedding or a group move, and you want a deposit prior to the reservations being dispatched and sent out. You could then go in and add a deposit into that customer profile, whatever the amount might be. Save that to the profile. What that effectively does now is, as you are finalizing and costing out reservations, it will take the money automatically away from that deposit until it runs out of money, letting you know that they have no more money left and you need to go get more money. If it were a partial payment, it would obviously apply partial payment to the total of the invoice and let you know how much was still due to them or they were due to you. Billing history. This keeps a record of all of their past invoices. Obviously, this customer has none, but I can go into here at any time, email the invoices, view it, print it if I need to by utilizing the options over on the left side there. I can do an aging report on this customer, letting me know how much money they still owe me and how late they've been on them. I can also generate reports and email them out here from the billing history tab. Keep in mind that all of this information is available back in the costing and invoicing area, but this is just a quick way to get to a specific customer. Document options are the default options that are set up for the customer and control how the customer profile behaves. As you can see, there are trip ticket options. You may override any of the default settings by selecting any of them or unchecking any of the options in here. Confirmations, you can override the default settings. Our default settings currently say display all the detailed charges. Perhaps this customer doesn't need to know the charges prior to the actual invoices. By selecting that option there, their confirmations will have no prices on them. Over on the left side, we have a document delivery. Again, this is overriding the global settings. By default, it's going to say use global settings, but you have the ability in here, perhaps this customer only wants HTML instead of PDFs. You can select that option there and it will override the global settings. You also have the ability to hide discounts on trip invoice if you would like to. Over on the right side, we'll go back over here to the invoice options. There's options here where you can select how the invoices are sorted. And what that means is if you had 15, 20 different reservations located on one invoice, this then determines how they are sorted. You may sort by confirmation number, passenger name, reference PO, or the default is billing start time. And again, you can override any of the default invoice options. Down below that, we have all of the email, auto email, and SMS options. These are all pre-selected based upon your global settings. Again, you are able to override any of those settings within the customer profile by either selecting or unselecting any of those options there. And these things cover such things as en routes, on boards, thank you notes, as well as including trip information link that's when utilizing the driver app, sending that information to the customer or passenger. Include affiliate driver vehicle information. This is coming out in the next update, and we're going to have a whole webinar addressing that specific item there. Over on the left side, going back over there, it controls their internet reservation options about what they can and can't do, whether they are allowed to book reservations or not, as well as being able to utilize multiple pricing plans for a customer when booking online. Previously, they were only able to utilize their default pricing. However, now we have enabled you to have multiple pricing plans for the customer, being able to select for different markets that they can have different pricing plans in there for. Digital signature, this would be if you want to require digital signature on confirmations or trip tickets for the customer. That was addressed underneath the global settings on the previous webinar there. You can also have specific group logos or corporate logos that would display on their greet signs at the airport. Simply click on the add option. It'll let you browse to a specific sign or logo that they have sent to you, and you can add it to their profile to be utilized on those group records. Now, one other thing, back here on the General tab, there is this top option right here of corporate affiliation. What this does is it enables you to attach multiple customers to a billing profile, a corporate billing profile. Keep in mind, a customer does not have to be associated to a corporate billing profile, but a corporate billing profile does have to have customers associated to it in order to be able to book. Perhaps Mr. A Test here works for one of the companies listed within our system. I'll attach him to the ATM Corporation. I now have the ability to bill corporate, meaning that all of the bills would be sent to ATM Corporation. I also have the ability to use corporate pricing. By selecting bill corporate or use corporate pricing, it will then in turn look to the corporate billing profile for all of its information. And what that means is if I have a special price negotiated with the corporation and I have multiple travelers, I would attach them all to that ATM Corporation, use the corporate pricing. At that time, it no longer looks at the customer pricing, it will look to the corporate pricing for all of its rates. That enables you to create a pricing structure once for the corporation and then not have to go into each individual customer. I do want to show you one little thing here. Even though this individual is attached to the ATM corporation and it does say Bill Corporate, if I go to create a reservation down in the lower left-hand corner here, you'll see that inside the reservation, first of all, the booking notes popped up that were associated to that customer. Once I've selected the type, ground, arrival, or departure, I do have the ability up here at the top to direct invoice the customer. Perhaps this reservation test, Mr. Test, is not having the ATM corporation pay his bills, and he still wants to book a reservation. In so checking this option here, it will detach this reservation from the profile, enabling you to book a reservation directly for Test in this instance. Get back out of there. Now, corporate billing profiles is where we set up these, as I call them, mother companies, if we would. I'm going to go into an existing one here. I can also add, edit, delete down here at the bottom, but in this instance, I'm going to go into the ATM because I already attached that customer to it. By selecting the edit button, you'll see in here, I have corporate name. I can create an account number, set customer account numbers. This has to do with if you're utilizing TransferNet and the Dean integration, you would want to utilize that. That would be discussed in a future one. Phone number, again, any of those information there. Tax exempt, this corporation does not pay taxes. By selecting that, none of the taxes would be applied to their reservations. In here, I have a primary email address, which I can then select which email which emails are sent to this. This would be utilized if there was one person at this corporation that received all of the emails. This is not a required field. You may have contacts that are controlling all of those emails. General notes and miscellaneous notes are internal notes only. They only appear within the customer profile. Pricing plan. This is the pricing plan that would be utilized for this corporate billing profile. Reference PO, invoice messages, all of these are the same that were set up within a customer profile. Keeping in mind, once I attach it to a customer profile and use corporate billing, it's looking at this information and not at the customer information. I can have email or invoices emailed automatically, or never email invoices, which would be to this primary one. It would only be sending to the contacts. Addresses, again, I can have multiple addresses available to me from the corporation. These can be used in any customer profile when booking a reservation. I'll demonstrate that. Credit cards, these are multiple credit cards that can be entered into the system. As you see that you can mark one as a primary if you would like to, that would be the primary credit card that would be utilized for the invoices or bills, also allowing you to select any of the other ones. Contacts. Contacts are the people located at the corporation, which would be booking reservations and or receiving the various emails. Now, at the corporate contact level, we have an additional level of functionality, enabling them to also have online capability to book reservations for all of the customers that are associated to the corporate billing profile, as well as access to the customer portal dispatch. Not the dispatch, enabling them to see where the vehicles are as well as the passengers. Passengers would be any passengers that could be associated to the corporate level there. Corporate pricing, same thing we covered in the customer pricing, being able to adjust their rates, as well as create specific pricing plans for the corporate. Discounts, again, being able to add a discount for the corporate profile, which would then apply to all of the reservations for that. Agents, being able to add commissionable agents within this area here. Deposits, being able to add a deposit to the corporation, which would then be applied to all of the invoices. The invoices would be based on the reservations created from all the customer profiles. Billing history lets me see a list of all of their past bills, invoices, aging, as well as statements, letting me know how late they are. And document options, again, the ability to override any of the settings based upon the requirements from the corporate profile there. So keep in mind that the customer may or may not be attached to a corporate billing profile. As you see here, I have some that are attached to corporate billing profiles. By selecting that, I have the ability to see all of the travelers or customers that are associated to the customer profile. Over on the far right, I can see whether I am using corporate pricing or billing corporate. I can also see which pricing plans I'm utilizing. I can see the email addresses for those. A customer that is not associated to any corporate billing profile would not have any corporate affiliation there. Other things I can see from this grid here, this option here, the affiliate column, I can quickly see which ones of these are my affiliates, being companies, other transportation companies that would be sending me work. Now, if we go back to the test one, when I go to create a reservation for this particular one, some of the things that I'm going to be available to use now, again, selecting the ground arrival or departure, select my date. In here, by clicking on the plus sign, I now have access to the customer addresses. I also have access to all of the corporate addresses. I also have access to any of the passenger addresses. I can select any one of these by highlighting it and clicking the OK, and that would be automatically populated into it. However, if this was one of the passengers, what I would be doing is selecting from the list, and you see I have the brother, but I also have access to the corporate passengers. If I select the brother, by doing so, I can then select which address I'm utilizing, as well as trip notes and preferences. By selecting those are automatically added to the reservation. So keep in mind, I have access to all of the customers' addresses. I also have access to the passengers that are associated to the customer. I also have access to all of the corporate addresses that are associated to the billing profile. Perhaps in this reservation, we're picking Mr. Test up at this address, which may be his home address, and maybe we're going to the office. I'll go down to the bottom here, select the office. But along the way, we need to pick up a couple of the other employees. By selecting the Add Passenger Stop option, again, I now have access to the traveler's other addresses, the corporate addresses, passengers. But as you can see here, I also have access to other customers that are associated to this corporate profile. So if I were to select this one here, well, maybe I need one that has an address in it. I'll take that one there, hopefully. I now have access to the addresses of the other travelers. If I select that, Add that. I've now added the stop into the reservation. And again, I can add as many different as I want, either pulling from the profiles, or I can type in my own if I would like down here, just manually type in addresses. By clicking on the OK, I now see that I have the addresses here. An additional stop in there. Okay. So that pretty much covers all of the customer and corporate profiles, setting them up, how you create them, how they are utilized, as well as the addresses, the emails, notifications, what can go out based upon each individual profile, either customer or corporate profiles, setting up the pricing that goes with them, contacts, discounts, those various things there. Now, some of the other things, and again, we'll talk more about the costing and invoicing once we get further down into the another webinar. But once I get into the costing and invoicing section, I do have corporate affiliation listed in here. So I can see all of the reservations for the ATM corporation here that I would want to create one individual bill for. I can also look just simply for customers within there. Once I have finalized these out, I'll quickly go through one so you can see what it does here. Edit it, make my adjustments accordingly. I can either create an individual invoice for that, or if I'm waiting to save it for later so that I can add many to it, click on the Save and Move to Build Invoices. And it has disappeared from this window, meaning where it went was over to the Build Invoice area. If I go over here and locate my ATM corporation list on the left side there, I will see all of the reservations for that corporation that are waiting for me to invoice them. Now, from here, I can individually put them down there, or perhaps I want to put multiples. I can use my Shift key, drag them down if I want to, or I can do one at a time by Move Selected, or if I want to move them all, simply click on the Move All to Invoice. Keep in mind that this invoicing area will be addressed in the upcoming webinar, so we're not going to get much detail about it right here, other than I can change an invoice date. If I want to create the invoice, simply click on Create Invoice down in the lower right-hand corner there. And I'm going to go ahead and go there. I had a little message that I had different collection methods on there. That invoice has now been created, as you can see. Moving over to the Manage Invoice area. Here's that invoice that was created. Now, the settings within the profile were to take no actions. I could have had the ability to automatically email that out. However, if I want to manually email it out, I simply click on the selected, email selected invoices. And the following window is going to provide me a list of all of the contacts as well as other emails that are located within those profiles that are listed to receive emails. However, the one that is selected is the only one currently that is selected to receive invoices. By clicking on the Send, it would send to that. It automatically checks the ones that are supposed to be receiving the invoices. This is simply giving you access to any of the others should they require an additional email be sent. I can also add in a recipient here if they wanted me to manually send it to somebody different. I can also type in an additional message, which would be sent with that email. And keep in mind, I have my attachments. We addressed that in a previous webinar about attachments where you can load those in there, and that would be sent with the invoice. If I click on the Send option, you'll notice now that it says emailed. It'll say yes instead of no, letting me know that it had been emailed. I can go to my email queue at any time and see what was sent by selecting the email queue up there. it tells me it was emailed, and it tells me to whom it was emailed. So I always have a record of that. In here, I have the ability to search by corporate customers, search anything I want. Again, we'll address the whole invoicing area there in more depth. So, in review, setting up our customers, click on the add option, enter in the information as required. We either attach it to a corporate affiliation or not. Customer does not have to be attached to a corporate affiliation. Corporate billing profiles are the profiles that those customers would be attached to, which would then control emails, pricing, invoicing, as well as notifications and other items there. Final touch underneath the reporting. And again, keep in mind that we will address the reporting area in more depth. But as you can see in here, I have the ability to run reports off of customers or clients, depending upon what I want to search for. In this instance, I'm going to do revenue by corporate client, select my date range, do a search, and in this part here, it tells me how much the ATM Corporation has brought me in revenue from that time frame there. If I were to expand this out, let's go back a couple of months here, do another search. It's going to bring me more information in here, or not, maybe not. Let's go back even further here. Let's go. And it's going to give me a list of the revenue that has been generated by each one of those corporate clients throughout that time frame there. So the ATM Corporation has brought me $18,000. The Sony Corporation. It does not give individual invoices and each one of those reservations. This is just a summary review of it. Going underneath expanded detail brings me much more detail. We'll talk about that in the future webinar there. But just keep in mind that this now enables you to run reports off of customers and or corporate clients, as well as underneath the revenue and booking. If I go in here, I have the ability to generate reports off of those. If I were to go to, for instance, just the charge item booking analysis, do a search here. In here, I have a list of the customers. Scrolling all the way over to the right, as you can see, I have amounts per reservation. In here, I have customers, as I said, or customer corporate accounts. I can filter these. Again, we'll talk more about these, but perhaps I wanted to see just how much the passenger test brought me. By so doing, I have now limited it down to their amount. And if I go to the far right, I have the totals here. Keep in mind, this can be exported out, grid export, Excel, CSV, PDF, whatever you would like to do with it for further analysis. So I think that covers everything there. Customer, corporate clients, some of the things you can do with it. Is there any questions? Adam, anybody have any questions today?
I think we've handled most of them as we went. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand or go ahead and type them in the question and answer, and we'll take a shot at them.
Okay. Adam, was there anything you needed to add or wanted to add right now? Or
the only thing I was thinking of was while you were in the corporate contacts was, once those corporate contacts are defined, I know we went through the internet reservation portal.
mm-hmm.
But perhaps you can touch on how creating those corporate contacts for like a Sony Corporation, give them access to book those reservations within the portal.
Okay. Underneath here, the contacts, going back to that corporate profile here, we'll go to this one here that says corporate all. If I can either add a new one here. I'm going to go into an existing one just so we can see some of the setup. Clicking on the edit button here. I have first name, last name, phone number, cell number if I want to, as well as address. I have the email address associated to this particular contact here. Select what they receive and don't receive by checking or unchecking any of the options there. But the ability to get to the online reservations by selecting the Internet Reservations Management and selecting the option to allow this person to manage internet reservations for this corporate client. I've now given this particular contact the ability to book reservations for any of the travelers that are associated to this corporate profile. And by travelers, I mean all of the customers that were set up on the customer account there. I also have the ability here to give them the corporate trip dashboard, which enables them to see the status of the reservations as well as the driver information. By selecting any of these options below, I effectively limit which ones of the travelers or customers that they are allowed to book reservations for. If I leave all of the options unchecked, that says that this contact has the ability to book and or see reservations for all of the customers associated to that particular corporate profile. Perhaps this was a specific executive secretary, which was only allowed to see the reservations for one individual. By selecting the 456 customer, they can now only see reservations and book reservations for this one customer. Again, if they have access to all of them, I leave them all unselected, or perhaps they're in charge of just 3 of them. By so doing, they can only see the reservations for those particular customers there. To email them their information, click on the email internet reservation information down in the lower left, and it would send them their credentials of how to log in and see those things there. So, that cover that, Adam?
Yes, thank you, Brian.
All right. Unless there's any other questions right now.
Brian,
yes.
I just wanted to make sure that we direct attendees over to our webinar page. We've added some recent webinars, 2 of which are going to be, I think, hot topics for us to go through. But as Brian said, we have a new release coming out here in the next few weeks. We'll certainly notify you guys when that is available. And of course, we're going to have a What's New webinar once it is released, so you can come in and get a good idea for all the new things within the new software. And so any of the new features, functionality, things of that nature will run through. And also, we're going to have a general session for the online booking portal. That one is going to be a fun one, simply because we've made some pretty advanced changes to how you can configure and use the portal. So you can go ahead and register for those now and add yourself to the webinar. So it'll remind you when it comes available. And then those are scheduled for 1st and 2nd week in March. And we do expect those to fill up pretty quick once we get closer. So be sure to register early. Thank you.
Okay, yes, you can find that by going to our website, FASTTRAKcloud.com, going to the webinars tab. You'll get an email once we're done here reminding you of that. But again, it has a list of all of the upcoming webinars, as well as being able to view the past webinars. And keep in mind, you can register for any of these. And as Adam stated, the first 2 weeks of March, they're important ones. The new release will be addressed there, and then the online customer booking portal, which he alluded to there, has some major changes in it that will be beneficial to all. So, unless there's any other questions today, I think we're going to go ahead and end this. I would like to thank everybody for attending. Please remember, any questions, email us at support@fasttrakcloud.com. Look forward to next week's webinar. Let's see what we're going to be covering there. Just remember that pricing options, going over setting up all the pricings there. All right, thank you again for everybody, and remember, do your security updates. Have a good week.